All right, can you hear me?
Yep. So thank you, Brian. So with us today, we have Brian Rose. Brian is a vegetation management specialist with Arborchem Products. And Brian is going to talk to us today about the herbicide application equipment and techniques. So with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to hover in the background here. So it's all yours, Brian.
All right, thanks, Dave. As my introduction from Dave, I'm Bryan Rose with Arborchem Products, vegetation management specialist, Penn State forester by education. I worked about 3 years in consulting forestry before I came over with Arborchem. I did a number of land management activities as a consulting forester, spraying being one of them. So I seen everybody kind of sharing where they're at and the weather there. I'm in southern Elk County, Pennsylvania, outside of Brockway, and it's -2 air temp and I think -31 with the wind chill. So it's cold out. But with that, I will begin here. There's my contact information on this first slide, and I'll have it at the end there again. So some housekeeping stuff before we get started. If you're spraying, you always have to follow label. Label is the law. So personal protective equipment, it can usually be found up front on that first panel if you're familiar reading a label. And just always follow the PPE requirements. I always say, even if it doesn't require the PPE I'm about to mention, I still say that, I suggest you wear, rubber gloves, long sleeves, pants, boots, and socks. So, whether you're mixing, loading, unloading, applicating, it's just a good rule to follow. This is where on a label you can find your active ingredients. Again, it's usually right up front on the first panel of that label. I chose Garlon 3A and Vaseline just as examples. Vaseline is the new and improved Garlon 3A, as we call it. It has a higher pound per gallon active ingredient. So that just means less inventory you have to carry, less mixing, and they reduce the signal word from a danger to a warning. So with applications on the label, if you're ever looking for information, this is usually what it looks like. These examples here, a broadcast application, ground equipment, or a foliar treatment. This is just kind of where you can refer to on the label to find some of the go-to stuff for mix rates, tank mix partners, things to be careful for when you're mixing different chemistries together, and just an overall rundown of what you're doing to refer to. A big one is revisions on a label. A lot of time the manufacturers will make revisions and then they'll add it in at the end. Whether that be a PPE revision, a use site revision, adding use sites, things like that. It's just really good that if you're working with a product that you feel that you're really comfortable with, it's good to just check those revisions at the end of a label when you get something, so you don't miss anything. Because if it's your license, you're held liable. Even if you work for a company and it's your applicator license, it's your responsibility. So with that, I'll start getting into, what we're going to actually cover in this presentation. And a lot of the times that's why spray. This is more of a forestry herbicide talk. And when you're dealing with landowners, they always want to know, well, why should I spray? And that's the question that we have to answer. And some of these photos probably look familiar to a lot of folks that's on here. We got Japanese stiltgrass down in the left-hand corner, fern in the top left, and striped maple on the right there. So, we spray usually because it's the right thing. Whether that be forest health for a healthy forest, growing a new forest regeneration. If you have non-native invasive plants choking out native regeneration, desirable trees, you're going to go in and try to do a site prep to release that regeneration. Maybe you don't have any regen in place. Maybe you got crowding due to beach brush or black gum in the stand. So it's a basewary issue of letting light in. So you're going to go in and maybe, I say that, so maybe it's not so much a fern problem or herbaceous cover on the forest floor, but you have woody interference in the mid-story. So, it starts at the ground and you can move your way up into the mid-story of the canopy, or even in the actual canopy of the forest to spray and do hack and squirt and make that room and allow that sunlight in. And then we spray for recreation, whether it be trails, opening up hiking trails and eliminating non-native invasive plants along hiking trails to show people what the native plants look like and what they can offer. Some non-natives, yeah, they may look nice, but it's not really what we want there from a recreation standpoint. We spray for hunting, food plots, keeping the weeds and the unwanted species out of our food plots, making, if you have a nice hunting tower or a ground blind or something like that, you might spray to open it up and allow you to see better. Gardening, obviously weeding your gardens and maintaining that, and improvements on your ground that you own, on your property, for building maintenance, whether it be crack and crevice on cement pads, landscape, things like that. And road clearing. Road clearing is a big one, right? You build a road in, I'm sure we have some management foresters here that work for, whether it be DCNR or a sawmill or a consulting forester. You have a road put into a harvest site or for just access for recreation on the game lands, you're disturbing that area. Okay, so now we have different things come in on those road edges that we need to control, so it doesn't spread out into the forest or grab a hold of people's vehicles. When you're out hiking, get it on your pants, transport seed, things of that nature. And a big one I get with folks when they call, maybe they're not a forestry contract sprayer and they're not spraying 3,000 acres in a year. Maybe they only have 10 acres, but they want to do the right thing on those 10 acres. And so they want to get out there and put boots on the ground and be in touch with their property and do the management activities to get something out of it for them. And I can understand that because my family owns property here in Elk County, and I do spray work and forest management property on there all the time. So with that, on why we spray actual herbicides in forestry, it's a tough battle. There's a lot of acreage, whether it's industry property, state property, privately owned property. There's just a lot of acres out there to cover for us to manage and spray. And I'm sure if you've been looking into spraying and forest management for a while now, you understand and you've heard that, you might do the right thing for multiple growing seasons on your property, but if the adjacent landowner doesn't do those control measures on their property, it's just going to be an ongoing thing. So that's just something that we're probably always going to battle. There's land use conversion, old farm fields that have grown up and, they got bush honeysuckle in them. Autumn olive. I don't know why that escaped me because that's one I hear all the time. Autumn olive, multiflora rose, just, that early successional habitat, early successional species coming in an old farm field. Maybe it's been, they want to transfer that into profitable timber acres, or they want to clear it and they want to put food plots in. So, and then development. So there's just a lot of land conversion going on out there, disturbance that's transforming our forests. Species composition, huge one, right? Where I live around here, I'm not that far from Kane, Pennsylvania, black cherry capital of the world. I used to work out of Kane as a consulting forester. And, guys worry about the older foresters, about the old cherry days. And you're just not seeing the regeneration or the seed source like it once was. And there's a number of factors there, but the forests are changing. And our species composition is changing, and we just got a lot of non-native invasives creeping in and trying to choke out the natives. And with that, we got deer. We have deer browse, right? That's a huge one. I don't need to probably talk on that too much because it's a problem that everybody's usually aware of, especially if you're in touch with your property. They don't want to eat the native or the non-native plants. They like to browse on the tender buds and the growth of the trees we're trying to promote and grow. So that's an issue. And then we get into the chemistries that we can use in forestry. If there's anybody, well, there is some people here from the southern reaches of our country. You can use a lot of different products in the pine plantations. They're just not the same or as diverse as our hardwood forests of the north. So that brings into question a lot of the chemistries we can use and how we can use them. And then it's, being a certified applicator or just an informed landowner and being able to identify the densities, the species composition, and what you're up against. I've went out and looked at some NRCS work with some consulting foresters, and just beech brush was the thing in question, and they wanted to do a basal bark treatment. And it was just, it was a beech thicket. It was just way too dense. You would have blown through, you would have been over label rates, and it just wasn't the tool for the job there. So it's just being able to get that information out. And then the almighty dollar. If you're a private landowner and you're looking for timber sale revenues, how do you get that across to a landowner to reinvest those dollars back into their acres to do the right thing? It can be a tough battle. And then, that goes hand in hand with timber markets, pulpwood markets. What's the dollar value they're getting for their resource, And, obviously if you're getting more money for your trees and you have more money to spend, you're going to probably think more about putting that back into your land. So, but one good thing of it all is landowners, large and small, everybody's becoming more aware of land management through the internet, just through communication. Dave Jackson and everybody at Penn State and all across the country, the colleges and their extension agencies do a great job of really getting the info out there for people to look at. So, and then the NRCS with their cost share dollars that they provide to landowners for planning and land management activities. So, and I like to say too to people, I am the chemical guy, and I need to make sales to make a living, but herbicides aren't always the answer. They're just another tool that we have to use, and they work really well hand in hand with other tools that we have, whether it be mechanical removal, mowing, hand pulling, things of that nature. So, but I could sit here and I could talk about studies on vegetation and using chemical control. It has been proven to be cost effective, controlling the underground biomass, the root source, and getting a permanent control. So they are a good tool, not always the answer, but it's a good thing to have. Develop an IVM plan. That's a big one, first and foremost, for landowners. It can be overwhelming for people. They have so many invasives, it's so thick, and they don't know where to start with it all. And, if you have large acreage, or even if you have small acreage, 10 acres, what have you, and you start into it, it's easy to start into one spot over here and start clearing, spraying, doing this, and being overwhelmed. And the next thing you know, you go for a walk and you see something over here and you want to go over. And so you need to focus in and have a plan on how you go about it. So, that, like I have written there, hand cut, follow up with a foliar spray. If things are too tall for you to spray, maybe you do a mechanical removal, let things resprout, and then treat, which we're going to get into all that as we go on. But I just want to stress that an IVM plan, whether you do your own research or you use a consulting forester or an extension educator or a service forester, it's good to have a plan going into it. And that's where this comes in with your application options. If you have things task ordered, okay, that's a big word I like to use with it, is task ordering areas. Herbaceous fern cover, grass cover versus a shrub complex, woody shrubs versus mid-story interference. Task order things on how you're going to go after them and how each application is going to apply to that. So as I have listed there, if you have herbaceous fern or grass cover, coming in, you're probably going to want to use a mist blower backpack if you can. Some landowners aren't going to have that as an option or want to spend the money on a mist blower backpack. So they go to a low volume water backpack, which is fine. It's just the mist blower in that situation allows you to produce fine mists into thicker brush, get better coverage, and just do the application better. Move on, you get into a shrub complex, woody shrubs in the understory. That's where you can start getting into some mechanical removal if you can. You can cut it with a chainsaw, you can treat the stumps, or you can go through and do a foliar treatment with a backpack. Then you move on to mid-story woody interference, and as you can kind of see, I'm moving from the ground up. And then with those larger stems, taller stems, you want to start looking into a low-volume basal bark or a hack and squirt, or removing the stem altogether with a cut stump or a cut surface treatment. And then if you have large scale acreage, 100 acres or better, and it's in your budget, you might want to contact a contract sprayer, somebody that has a mist blower machine that can come out and cover those acres and get something done. Because if it's just you and your family or friends doing it and you have serious acreage, it gets frustrating because it seems like you're not making a drop in the bucket, on your own. But not saying that that's not something that I should pull you away from. But if you want to, make an impact and get it done, sometimes that's the route you have to go. So with that, that's just a little about developing and implementing a vegetation management plan, and we'll start getting into the actual beef of the spraying and what you can do, how to do it, and some of the stuff out there that can help you do it. And the biggest one is a low volume backpack foliage treatment. This is a very popular one with landowners from, if you're treating barberry, you can do a foliar treatment. If you're doing autumn olive, depending on the height, you can do a foliar treatment. Stilt grass, all that, that's all foliar. So typically you have a hotter mix, as we say, in a backpack because it's low volume. Okay, so that's versus a high volume application. So with low volume, you're going to be about 10 to 25 gallons per acre with a 4 to 6% herbicide solution. High volume, you're going to be at 100 gallons per acre, but you're only going to have about a 1% herbicide solution in your mix. So high volume is what you're going to use to get really good coverage, really wet down thick, dense infestations. Or the low volume backpack, you're going to use that for smaller, less dense, medium density brush. And really from a landowner standpoint, the low volume backpack is probably the most popular and the way to go, because with the high volume, you need a spray rig, because if you're putting out 100 gallons to the acre, a 5-gallon backpack, it's almost not even possible. So, well, it isn't possible. So roughly 10 to 25 gallons per acre, focus on that 8 to 10 foot height threshold. Okay. Because when you're doing low volume backpack applications, the important part on woody brush is hitting that terminal bud, that main stem on the top portion of the plant to gain control. So you get up there above 8, 10 foot, you essentially have a squirt gun in your hand and you're trying to hit a dime up top. So it's, then you're just getting off target damage, you're blowing through product, and it's just, at that point you want to look into either cutting the stem down or basal treating. And the thing about the low volume backpack is if you have a dense infestation, you can treat it. If you have any misses, you can come back the following year when you see it green up and you can just spot spray with a backpack. And they're a cheap investment, low maintenance costs. And, you can get them just about any hardware store you go to, but we're going to talk about some of the different backpack options. This is just some low volume backpack work that I did on a shooting range. That's the backstop there. That was black alder. It had come in. I fully retreated the stuff there that's about 6, 8 foot tall, and then some of the larger stems in the background. I know it's tough to see. I think I hack and squirted those. And then I haven't updated my presentation, but all those grasses, those will come back. I mean, you'll set it back for a growing season, but everything's going to rebound and come back. But the important thing is all those woody stems, you're going to get root control and eliminate those. So the question is, with backpacks, in the equipment, what do you use? Well, there's basically homeowner grade backpacks and like an industrial grade backpack. I have the Birchmeier here on the right listed as an industrial grade. It's probably one of the best or the best backpacks out there. And then on the left is a Chapin homeowner landscape grade backpack. It has a rechargeable electric battery. Okay, now what's the big difference? So the Chapin on the left there, number one, with the battery and the plastic wand, you can't control your pressure. Basically, when you pull the trigger, what you're spraying is what you get. With the Birchmeier, and it's a diaphragm pump. The Birchmeier on the right, the piston pump, you can control your pressure, and you can build a lot more pressure with that piston pump versus a diaphragm pump. The biggest thing is the Birchmeier has Viton chemical resistant seals. Okay, so you can do oil-based basal bark applications as well as water-based foliar applications. So without Viton seals, that oil-based chemistry will just destroy the seals in the backpack, and then it's going to leak. You're gonna bend over to pick something up or do something in the woods, and you're gonna get a shower down your back of your chemical and what you're trying to do. And the nicest thing about the Birchmeier is too the pump's external. Okay, that diaphragm pump in the bottom of the tank, it's really tough to work on those especially if you have spray in the tank. The Birchmeier on the right, as long as you take the pressure off the pack, you can tear apart that whole pump and fix any clogs, worn out seals, anything like that. And I'm going to get into some more of the Birchmeier maintenance here as we go on. And that's just a picture of some old Birchmeiers that had a hard life. They have a grease fitting on the pump too, so you can keep that piston lubricated. And I'm going to get into all that as we move on. And you can screw off a water gun if you're doing foliar treatments, and you can screw on a basal wand for basal bark treatments. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds there. You do have to clean the backpack in between. If you're going from water-based foliar treatments, you're going to want to clean your backpack out with some Dawn dish soap or a tank cleaner product before you switch over between those two. Because if you're trying to get selectivity to broadleafs, say you got some invasives on the edge of your yard and you're trying to use a selective mix and you don't want to harm your grass there. Well, you were doing basal applications before. Well, if you don't clean that backpack good, the basal bark oil is non-selective. So if you don't get that cleaned out, you're going to harm your grass. Or if you have glyphosate or something non-selective in there, you're going to harm your grass. There's 4 sizes. I really won't get into that too much. If you have questions, you can ask. This is another good backpack. It's a step down from the Birchmeier. It's the Swiss Mex Super Duty. It's great for water-based applications. You can do the basal bark applications out of it, but it's going to leak. It's probably not going to hold up as well as the Birchmeier, but it might be more within your price range. So I just wanted to kind of outline some options that are available. The biggest thing with backpacks is, and the Birchmeiers especially, is, people get them and they use them and they don't take care of them. And then they say, well, Bryan, this backpack's supposed to be really great, but it's leaking, it's clogged, it doesn't work, what the heck? Well, you're using these herbicides, and a lot of them have salts. They're a salt formulation, so they're corrosive in nature. It's just like sidewalk salt. You get it on your boots, leather boots, it turns white and it dries them out. It's the same thing with the herbicides on gaskets and seals. That's why, you want the Viton, but they're going to wear out over time. But if you clean them, it's going to prolong the life. So this applies to not only the Birchmeier, but any backpack that you use or pump up hand sprayer that you use. the end of the day, let the pressure off of the backpack or the hand sprayer. Okay, whether that's taking the handgun or the wand, spraying back into the tank, and whether it has a pressure release valve, what have you. But get the pressure off that pump and off of those seals, and it's going to extend the life of it a lot longer. Keep your wand nozzles, tips, keep them clean of corrosion. I have starting fluid there. You can use engine degreaser. If you're in the field or at home, you want something that's pressurized in an aerosol can that's going to be able to kind of blast through the gunk. But you want something that's going to cut through that gunk and dirt and corrosion and keep everything cleaned out. On these here, you can see a grease cup down on the right-hand side of the pump there, which I'll get into more of that as we go on. You want to keep that greased. You want to keep grease packed in there to keep that piston lubricated. And, if it's a diaphragm pump, you're obviously not going to have that. But whether, any type of backpack you have, you want to keep any moving parts greased. Okay, and watch for debris buildup, because I guarantee you things will, if you're running Escort or Oust or some type of dry, the abrasiveness of it, it can chunk up, leave chunks in the tank, you get dirt in there, you get thorns, bark. So you just got to keep all that cleaned out of there. Check valve, we'll cover that on the Birchmeier moving forward. Hose clamps and fittings are a big one. Just keep them tight. If I'm doing actual spray work and not just demos and stuff, my hose clamps, I like to crank them down, run 2 hose clamps on a shank on the shank for the gun or the wand going into the hose if you have to, and then electrical tape them. It keeps them tight. And then on a hose clamp, you got that excess that sticks out or the nut, and that'll catch on brush and everything. You electrical tape them, kind of saves you some headache of getting hung up on stuff. So the Birchmeiers, this is the pump assembly here. That air chamber in the middle just screws off, and there's a check valve. Brand new, they pop out pretty easy, but if you've used it, it's probably in there pretty tight. Just a flathead screwdriver, you can pop it out, and that's usually the culprit. I've seen the aluminum foil that seals the top of the herbicide jugs. I've seen that get in there. I've seen dirt and sticks and stuff. It sucks into that check valve and it prevents it from working properly. And then if you're running basil bark mixes through it with that heavy oil, that heavy viscosity oil, it just wears them out. Especially if you're really cranking the pressure on it, they just wear out. And you can change it. And what I usually say is, if you're going to change the check valve, get a seal kit for everything and replace all the seals, because chances are they're probably getting ready to go too. And then grease it. I grease, there's a seal here, and there's 2 seals with this check valve, one here and one below. Grease everything when you put it back together. Just a little bit of grease to keep the corrosiveness off of it. Big culprit in the field, because the Birchmeiers are designed to take apart in the field when you have issues. Basically, if you carry a Leatherman and a pocket knife, you can take these apart. There's a few snap rings if you really want to get technical that you might need snap ring pliers for, but this wing nut here that tightens to the tank, when you loosen that and fold the pump off, there's a seal in here. I believe they started making them green now instead of clear. So if you tear your pump apart and that seal falls out, it's, and if you don't know it's there, you're never going to find it, right? So if you lose that, you're not going to seal to the tank, and you're not going to build pressure. So that's a culprit. And then the wing nut that tightens to the tank, they come loose a lot. So you got to keep an eye on that. Okay, this is what I really like to highlight on. That piston on the right has a wing nut on top. These Birchmeiers, when they sit over the winter or however long you let them sit, or neglect them, that rubber piston will swell. Okay, and then it seizes up in the cylinder. So a lot of guys go and they get their Birchmeier out, for spray season, and the handle's seized up on it, and they can't get it loose, and they're wondering what the heck's going on. Well, usually that's what it is. That piston seized in the cylinder wall. So when you put it away for the winter and you're done, make sure you basically winterize the backpack and clean it out real good. And even if you want to take that cylinder off of the pump piston there and grease all of that, that'll save you a headache. And then that wing nut tightens to expand the piston, loosen it to take the pressure off. Just some more photos. That's the grease cup. When you use the backpack, you want to tighten that in. Depending on how much you're spraying, if it's going to be a full day of spraying, when you fill up, you might want to turn it, once or twice a day, turn it in and just keep it greased. Okay, so we're talking about low volume applications. Very, very popular with landowners and forestry. This is a low volume application, but off of a UTV. And I want to mention too, maybe I probably didn't, I don't think I mentioned it earlier. With low volume applications, when you're getting coverage on your target, on your plant, you want to treat at least two sides of the plant, and you want to spray the leaf surface to the point of coverage, not to the point of saturation where it's just dripping down off the plant, just to the point of coverage where you get full coverage on the leaf surface. And, that's important there to have, in that instance there, to have a good penetrating agent, spreader, sticker, an adjuvant in your mix. Now, I don't want to get too long-winded on that. If you're using something like a Cord XRT2, it has a adjuvant surfactant already in it. And if you get into late season applications and the leaf surface starts hardening off, you might want to add some more surfactant to get that bite through the leaf. But I just want to mention that on low volume, so you kind of know how to do it. But this is another way of doing low volume off of a UTV. Same thing. Basically look at it like you have a backpack tank on the back of that UTV, but it's bigger. And you can spray low volume off of that. So if you have an ATV, UTV, and you want to put a 50-gallon tank sprayer on there with a wand or a gun off of that with an electric pump, you can do that. You really don't need a pony motor, like a 5-horse engine on there to run a big pump, because it's just not needed. An electric pump will work fine. Not that I don't think that anybody really does this so much in forestry, but I know in right-of-way utility, guys will go out with a low-volume tank mix, and they'll, instead of having the low-volume backpack gun, which I'm going to show here later on, they'll put a high-volume foliar gun on it like that, and you're just blasting the product out of there, and it's just not what you want to do. So if you're going to do low volume, you don't want a high-volume gun on there. Excuse me. This is the dual spray water gun. If you're looking from the back of the gun forward, the right-hand nozzle is a fan pattern. Left-hand nozzle is an adjustable tip. And then that T at the top, that T valve, you can switch back and forth between them. So if you got the fan pattern, that's going to be great for most of your brush spraying. It's going to give you a nice fan swath to get coverage on the plant. You get something taller, you can use that adjustable nozzle to kind of get a straight stream to reach higher. If you're spraying pine, I know maybe some people aren't doing that because they're trying to promote pine, but in some instances, people are trying to control the pine or the cedar. It's really nice having the adjustable nozzle, because you can tighten it down to where it's almost a fog pattern coming out of it. And then you can get right on top of the pines and the cedars, and you can get really good coverage on them, because it's tough on those needles to get good coverage. That's the low volume backpack work I showed earlier. Okay, so that's low volume backpack. Remember, you're running 4 to 6% herbicide mixtures, so just spray the target to the point of leaf coverage on the leaf surface, two sides. Start at the top, work your way down, and focus on getting that terminal bud, that new growth on the plant. Focus getting coverage on that. So moving on to basal bark, cut, stump, and hack and squirt applications. Top left is a hack and squirt. The bottom left would be a cut stump or cut surface application, and the right would be a basal bark application. Stump treatment, this is why we treat stumps in hardwood species. They have a below ground root system, and they will produce coppice growth or stump sprouts, root suckers, and they will grow off the old existing root system that's there. Now with your pine species, that doesn't happen, so you don't have to worry about treating stumps. But with our hardwood species, like your black gum and ailanthus and stuff like that, you have to worry about that, treating your stumps. So to do that, you're going to do a low volume or an ultra low volume basal bark treatment, or a cut stump, cut surface, which I'll get into after this. So what that is you're treating the target from the ground line to 12 to 18 inches up the stem, 360-degree coverage. Now, according to label, we can treat targets up to 6 inches diameter at the base. So at the base of that target, 6 inches and under, it is legal by label to treat those targets. Anything above that, you're going to want to hack and squirt or just cut down and treat the stump. But the important thing is, remember, 12 to 18 inches up the stem, 360-degree coverage. If you get a larger stem, 6-inch stem, and you only treat one side and you leave that back side untreated, you can get regrowth and sprouts out of that. So it can be done year-round. You can do this any time of the year. It's a dormant treatment as well as a growing season treatment. Just keep in mind snow depth and wet stems. So if you got more than a few inches of snow and you can't get to that root collar of the plant, you can't do it, because even if you do dig the stump out, it's going to be wet. And what's going to happen is oil and water separate, right? So if you have a basal bark mix in the tank with an oil carrier, the stem's wet, the water's not going to allow the oil to penetrate the stem. And you'll know that when you do it, because it'll turn to a white milkiness on the stem. So pay attention to snow depth. If the stems are wet, you can't do that. It will be rain fast up right until the time of the rain event. So if you're out spraying and a rain event rolls in on top of you, everything you just treated behind you is good. You don't have to go back and worry about retreating any of that. It'll be fine. But if the stems are wet, like I said, they won't take the herbicide. Just to touch on that a little bit more, with foliar treatments, we usually say rain fast within an hour. So depending on how hard the rain event is, everything you just treated for the past hour might have a chance of not getting optimal control. Now, if a small rain shower comes in, you don't have to hike back through the woods, for the past hour trying to figure everything out. Maybe just the last, little bit that you treated, half a tank or what have you, you go back and hit. But I just want to make everybody aware of that. And another big thing is with the basal bark, direct the spray towards the ground. So when you're using your wand to do the application, it's easy, depending on the wand you're using that has comes down and it has a hook on it, it's easy to turn that to the side with your wrist, cock your wrist and spray right at the stem. And what that does is, you have a 2-inch stem, or a 1-inch stem, it's easy to blow past that, and then you get a haloing effect around the bottom of the stem. The best way to reduce that is keep your tip directed towards the ground and start at ground line and treat up the stem getting that 360-degree coverage. We talked about it, Garlon 4 Ultra and Basal Oil. That's the staple. That's what you use for the basal bark treatments. You can either mix your own Garlon 4 with the basal oil. It's not really that hard. Just make sure you get it into, you can either put it in a tank and mix it, fill into a backpack, or mix it in your backpack. If you don't want to do any mixing, you can buy a product called Pathfinder 2. It comes ready to use, and you just dump it in your backpack and you can go. That's probably the better option for a lot of people, because they don't have to deal with any mixing or anything like that. Be aware of puddling at the base. The coverage for this is just treat the stem to where you see the absorption of the oil. You don't need to hose the stem down to where it puddles at the base of the target. You know, if you're just using Garlon, you're wasting product. If you have anything like a Mazapir in the tank with it, you can get off target damage in a forest overstory setting. So, you know, just be aware. Just, you know, all you need to do is just treat up that stem and get coverage and absorption into it. 2 to 4 gallons an acre is a normal application rate. Just keep that in mind, whether you want to write it down, keep it in the back of your head when you're keeping your spray records. Pay attention to what you have out on an acre. With Pathfinder 2, even that 10 gallons per acre, you can even go beyond that and still be on label. But when you start getting up to that 10 gallons an acre mark, you might want to think about maybe a different option as far as treatments, whether you want to hand cut it and let it regrow and then foliar treat, or hand cut and treat stumps. Because it gets to the point where you're just basically turning. You know, there's a stem here, you can't even really move. You're just treating stems, and it's just you're blowing through product. You're not getting anything done, and you can do something better. So this is a visual representation. That's a shagbark hickory up in the right-hand corner. I wasn't trying to control that tree, but I wanted to highlight the root collar. You can see that duff layer, that leaf litter layer at the bottom of the stem. The thinnest bark on a tree species or any, you know, woody stem species is down at that root collar. Okay, and the bark gets thicker as it goes up. So, you know, you want to try to remember, if you can, to kick away that duff layer to treat that root collar, because that's where you're going to get your best absorption. And stuff on thick bark species, you know, black walnut, black gum, stuff like that, it's nice to get that leaf litter out of the way and treat that root collar. And that's just a visual representation on the left of your spray wand and a stem that you're treating. Root collar has the thinnest bark. We covered that. Yeah. This is, you know, just an action shot of, you know, an application. It's a multi-stem species. Multi-stem species like that can be tough. You know, you really, you're using a lot of product. It's more time consuming. Something like barberry that you want to treat that has a multi-stems coming off the root collar, it's kind of nice to open up your pattern so you kind of have a hollow cone pattern and get down into the middle of the target and then kind of go around and get that coverage and then around the outside instead of trying to focus in on every small stem. So I keep talking about basal bark, and you know, we talked a little bit about the application. Now I'll cover a little bit on the equipment. The Birchmeier backpack, or a backpack, you know, is what you're going to use to put your mix in, and then you're going to apply basal bark with a wand. Now, you can use the wand that comes with the backpack. That's fine, you know, if you want to go that route. The thing to remember is I'll jump ahead. Well, we'll get to it, but you can put you can put a low volume tip on. If you really want to go the Cadillac route, you can go the ultra low volume B&G basal wand. And what it is it has a cable that runs from the trigger up to the tip. Okay. And then there's a nipple up here that retracts in when you pull the trigger against this Teflon seal, and it allows the product to come out with the low volume tip. Okay, so then when you let off the trigger, you're not leaking the amount of product that's in this wand. Okay, so if you're treating acres and acres of basil, you know, you'll find out that over applying can hit you in the pocket. So something like this is really going to save you money on your acres by saving that product. And they're heavy duty. You know, a lot of the ones you get are plastic. You're spraying, you stop to take a drink of water, talk to your buddy, you set your wand down. You know, you take a step backwards, trip on something, you step on the wand, you break it. Okay, at least this, you're probably not going to break it. You might bend it a little bit, but you can bend it back. So that, you know, I refer to this as the Cadillac to basal bark treatments with a wand. It's just a good way to go. So pays for itself with a lot of basal work. Do not take paper clips or anything and stuff into the tips to clean them out. If you're going to do that, use a nylon brush like a toothbrush or something like that. Paper clips, pocket knives, you'll gouge these tips, destroy the seals, and you'll just ream the tip out and ruin it. And then people say, well, this wand isn't supposed to leak. Well, if you bend it and alter this cable to the trigger, it's not going to close the tip. You're going to leak. You gouge the tip out, ruin the seal, it's going to leak. So you have to take care of it. This is the handle assembly, the Extend-A-Band valve assembly, as it's called by the manufacturer. If you have one of these, or you purchase one and it's leaky at the handle there's little nut, that silver nut that goes in there. That's the packing nut, and it has a rubber seal inside of it, which I have some more pictures down here in the bottom. You can see that little rubber seal inside there. It used to be they were like a felt packing that fit over that rod going in, and that packing would wear out and it would leak and you have to replace it. Well, then they went to this with that rubber gasket, and it's better, but sometimes that rubber gasket pulls out of there, and then it'll leak on you as well. So if it's leaking, try to tighten that silver nut up there. And if it's still leaking out of there, you're going to want to check that packing inside of there. There is a filter screen in the end of the wand, which is another nice feature of the B&G wand, that catches all the debris, all the corrosive gunk and stuff that builds up. It catches into your filter screen. You can screw that off, take it apart. What I like to do is take carb cleaner, parts cleaner. You can use sea foam if you keep that around for small gas engines and stuff. Gas, something that's going to bust through that corrosion. Put a little bit of it in a water bottle, take your filter screen apart, put it in there, shake it around, and you can take an air hose then and spray it out, and it'll be all cleaned up. But you do want to pay attention to this and keep this clean. And it's the same thing in the water guns for the backpacks that I showed, where the hose comes in. It has the same setup with the filter screen, and you want to keep that cleaned out. Okay, this is what I was getting at. If you don't want to go the route of the B&G wand, what I do suggest doing is getting the low volume tip here, the Spray Systems low volume 5500 adjustable tip. It's going to save you. It's going to restrict the flow of your product, because if you're using that landscape backpack, that wand and that tip is made to spray foliage and to spray gravel lots and things of that nature. It's not made to be low volume for basil. So just simply by buying a low volume tip and putting that on, you're going to save yourself a lot of product on an acre. And it's adjustable. You can go from a fine mist hollow cone to a straight stream. So, and keep in mind too that there's 3 different sizes. If you buy a low volume tip, Y1, Y2, Y3, they tell you that the Y1 is for summer when it's warmer and product isn't as thick. Y2 spring, summer, fall, kind of the mid-range. The Y3 for winter. I run a Y3. It's just my preference. It's still low volume enough, but be aware of that, because if you have a Y1 tip and you're spraying in the winter and your mix thickens on you, it will give you problems. This is a Mazapir in your mix, like I talked about doing basil bark treatments, and you have some Polaris Arsenal in your basil mixes. This is some red oak regeneration. This wasn't necessarily root pickup, off-target root pickup from treating stems adjacent to this. This was more so I believe flashing. So the black gum, I believe that they were treating, it flashed over to the root system of the regeneration in the oak. So it is something to keep in mind. And really, from a private landowner standpoint, and really a forestry standpoint, just really don't even suggest running the Polaris in there unless you have a really tough to control species. So that's low volume basil bark. One of the better tools and more common tools for landowners, out there, because even if you have vegetation that you can foliar treat, that's low to the ground, you can probably still basal bark treat it as well. So it seems to be a pretty common choice amongst landowners. Moving on, we'll talk about hack and squirt. This is done by simply putting a hack into the xylem phloem area of living tissue of a tree species, woody species, and applying an herbicide into there. And what that does is translocates throughout the plant for control into the root system. It is suggested to do in late summer, early fall, when plants are starting to shut down, and pull that herbicide into their roots, and it's translocating to go into to overwinter. That's when you want to do this. Now, if you start doing it on beech or what have you in the spring when sap flow starts, it's, you know, you ever cut into a beech tree in the spring and you got water pushing out, well, that's what's going to happen to your herbicide. It's going to push it back out of the stem, and you're not going to get the control. Dave can definitely clarify this to you as well through Penn State Extension. If you're trying to go after Atlantis, tree of heaven, this is probably one of two, probably the better option on the bigger stems, is to hack and squirt the Atlantis trees and get translocation out into the roots and the root suckers in late summer, fall. Keep in mind, you don't want to girdle the stem. You don't want to put hacks the whole way around the stem and disrupt the plumbing of the tree. You want to leave some plumbing intact, because what that's going to do is allow that species, that tree, that target, to keep moving nutrients and water through the plumbing. So you're going to get the movement throughout the target. It's great on the larger stems. You get up above 6 inches, you get a large tree of heaven, a large black gum, Royal Polonia, things like that. You can hack and squirt and get good results. They say 1 hack per 2 inches diameter. What I say is, at the very least, go north, south, east, west. Get 4 hacks. So obviously, if you're going after a 12, 16-inch stem, you're going to want to get more than 4 hacks into the tree. But as a rule of thumb on those 4, 6, 8, 10-inch stems, north, south, east, west. Most popular way to go about that is 50-50 glyphosate with water. So don't worry about looking at your percent active ingredient and doing the math. It's just simply, if you have a cord or rodeo, 50% of that with 50% of water, volume for volume. And you can treat it, Vaseline, triclopyr, which is Garlon 3A. You can use that undiluted as well. You can have issues with the flashing there, but glyphosate's probably your cheapest and most effective option. What I say about this guy over here on the right is, I always tell people it changed my life because doing forestry work, we always use the squirt bottles that you get from Lowe's. Just that you'd put water in and spray plants, whatever. And those things would clog up, the tips would break, and they just were a headache and a nightmare. You'd step on them, you'd catch them on stuff, break them. And when I came over to Arborchem, they gave me one of these. And this is my photo here, treating stumps on my dad's property. And I do hack and squirt with it too. It's made by Birchmeier. It's called a Spray-Matic. It's a pretty heavy duty sprayer. I mean, you can beat it off trees, step on it, and they hold up pretty well. The nice thing is they got a pressure release valve there. So if you got guys spraying under you and they're out working all day and it's hot and they get done at the end of the day, and they can release the pressure on that, leave the juice in the jug and put it in the sprayer and put it back in the truck. Okay, so there you're not getting a cheap spray bottle that swells in the heat and explodes in the back of the pickup and puts blue dye and herbicide everywhere. And it's got a trigger lock on it as well, so you don't squirt yourself when you're hacking or going through the brush. So, and they're Viton seals too, so they hold up well. So you can use that for hack and squirt, and you can use it for cut stump and cut surface treatments. You can even throw it, if you're a forester and you got guys, forest techs underneath you or something, and you're out checking haul roads and logging jobs and you see multiflora rose in the ditch somewhere or whatever, you can carry something like this with you too and keep some juice in it and jump out and treat stuff. So, it's pretty versatile. Tree trimmers, tree guys use it a lot for tree removals and treating stumps. But it's great for cut stump and cut surface as well. It's really probably the best use for it when you're doing a tree removal, stem removal, and you treat that outer cambium area on the stump, as you can see in that bottom right photo. The important thing here to remember is you want to hit that outer layer of the stump and treat that. You don't have to worry about getting that center heartwood because that's just dead structural wood. Now, I understand with a 2-inch stem or a 4-inch stem, it's tough to not treat the whole surface. I get that. So, if you have a small stem, it's okay to treat that heartwood. But what I really want to touch on is the difference between the cut stump and the cut surface. So as you can see there on the second main bullet point down in the middle, cut stump, you're using oil as a carrier. Cut surface, you're using water as a carrier. So with cut stump, Garlon 4 and basil oil, you're going to treat that xylem phloem area and any exposed bark, root flares, anything like that. Cut surface, you're only going to treat that freshly cut exposed xylem phloem cambium layer because water will not absorb through the bark where oil will. And another thing is, if you're cutting stems, you will not be able to come back and retreat within an hour or two with water. You'll have to have oil because once that stump hardens, you won't get penetration. Again, I mentioned Pathfinder 2 for basil bark. It can be used for cut stump, cut surface treatments as well. That's just a photo that was out in Michigan like 2 years ago on a right-of-way. That was just a training. The guys were really pouring on the stump treatment and over-applying. And I think the photo kind of speaks for itself there. You just need to get coverage on that stump. And he treated that root flare as well. You don't need to hose it down to where it's puddling and running off. That oil will absorb through and you'll get your control. Little video here.
Hey, Bryan, while that's going on, I'm just going to jump in here real quick and say we're at the top of the hour. In the chat pod, I did post a link to the Survey Monkey. So if any of you need pesticide credits, please click that link and it will open a new browser for you on your web there. Fill out the survey, give me your birth date and your pesticide recertification number. We're going to keep going, let Bryan finish, but in case folks have to get going, we're at the top of the hour, so that will get you your 2 credits for today. So turn it back over to you, Bryan.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, sorry, I'm going a little long-winded. I happen to do that. High volume applications, you're probably not going to use it a ton in forestry, but it is out there for real nasty, dense infestations with grapevine, wisteria, oriental bittersweet, and things. Just you got everything in there. You might want to look into a high volume foliar application. You're spraying off of a spray rig with a pony motor, running a big pump, operating at a higher, 100 psi, 200 psi. It's the high volume foliar gun. Ultra low volume thin vert. This is a big one that I like to put out there for landowners, especially in forestry. It's ultra low volume versus low volume backpack. So you're using a thin vert carrier, which is an oil emulsion, okay, and it's a droplet with the herbicide emulsed inside the droplet. So it's a 6 to 10% herbicide mix. So it's hotter than a 4 to 6% low volume backpack mix. So therefore you have to you can get less coverage on the plant. Okay. It's not good for dense infestations because it's just not made for that, where you have to really blast into the vegetation. It's good for spot treating and lighter infestations like that you're foliar treating. And we have YouTube videos online that I'll talk about at the end that kind of show it. And I just think it's a great tool for forestry where you're getting into remote areas. Say a spray contractor can't get there on steep terrain or something and treat a patch where you have regen present that you're trying to preserve. you can get in there with a backpack of thin vert and go 3 times farther with it than you could with a water backpack. So you're not running to the nurse tank on the 4-wheeler and having to refill. And it's just, it's a cleaner application, I think. So where you're putting out 10 to 25, you're probably going to be, I don't want to say 10 to 25, that's a big swing, but if you're putting out 10 to 15 gallons with low volume backpack, you're probably going to be at 2 to 5 with the thin vert. And you have to have special equipment for that to put it out. You can't just use a low volume backpack gun, but you can reach out to me if you have questions. That's the coverage you just need on the plant to gain control. You don't need to hose it down or spray to the point of coverage as you do with low volume. You can broadcast it as well. You just have to have special broadcast nozzles like shown here. Those are the special nozzles for the thin vert brush guns. They just have a very small hole that restricts product flow, which helps with the ultra low volume. This was barberry, treated in a forestry setting. The thing is with thin vert that I like, you're not getting as much blow through from the target into the regeneration that's there on the forest floor. So you can kind of preserve more of it and not get as much off target. Now, there's barberry back there on the ground because that was seed that came back. It's just what you're going to deal with, have to go back and spot treat. I won't play the video since we're running low on time. Air blast machines, these are the what exists in the forestry world. The DCNR, Game Commission, private landowners, a lot of people utilize these guys with these custom built rigs. You're doing the same thing you do with a backpack mist blower, but with a machine. If you really need to get something done on large acreages, this is the way to go. That's what it looks like. You're not doing any harm to the overstory. You're just targeting the understory and the midstory and eliminating that competing vegetation for a site prep, to open it up, let sunlight in, and grow your new forest. I will play this video. This was Clint Smirker on a game lands down around Altoona, Pennsylvania. We were spraying pre-emergent for stiltgrass control, Japanese stiltgrass control in a forested stand. And I just like the video because, you can see that air blast mist blower pattern reaching out there, and it just kind of puts it into view of how you can cover more acres, obviously with a machine. That's the backpack mist blower. That you're accomplishing the same thing that Clint was doing with his machine, but it's more affordable for landowners to do. It's great for fern, stiltgrass, herbaceous cover. You can use it for brush control too. Just some of the contractors that do work out there with the mist blowers. For your sidewalks, gravel lots, things of that nature, if you're spraying glyphosate 3-4 times a year, you can get a product called Esplanade EZ that has 3 active ingredients. One of them is a pre-emergent herbicide. You get it down in March, April, early on in the year, and it should have weed control all year long, so you're not spraying 2 or 3 times a year. It's a great product. I like to let people know about it because I use it all the time on my families. Everybody in my family wants me to spray their driveways and everything, and it's something that I use a lot of. So it's a great product to look into as well. Just some of the results of some stuff I sprayed. That's 5 months after treatment. You're not getting the repop because you're controlling the seed source in the ground, not just the above ground growing plant. So with that said, the outcome and the right, I don't want to say it's a necessary needs to a desirable end, but if you're going to spray, you're going to do this, you're going to have brownout. It's just part of it's the nature of the beast, and you just have to be aware of that. If you do it right, you can reduce that brownout. Selective applications of the backpack, you can avoid some of that off target, and it's just what comes with the territory. And I like to make landowners aware of that they're going to have brownout in controlled dead vegetation. So be prepared for that. But once it falls down, it's removed, it's out of there, you're going to regrow. You're going to get green back. It's not going to be like that forever. I'm not going to go over those mixes. If you have any questions, you can call me. I put that in there. That's me steelhead fishing this past year in Erie. we had a real good day. I like to put a little photo in it at the end of every presentation. And I thank you guys. Check out our ArborChem YouTube page. There's my contact info. Feel free to reach out to me. I think we'll take any questions that we have now.
Yeah, why don't you leave that up there, Bryan? People can get your contact information. And I'll just mention again, folks, that I did post in the chat the link to the SurveyMonkey. So if any of you need to get pesticide credits, be sure to fill that out. I'll send it out again tomorrow. Once I have the recording from today, I'll send those out together tomorrow. If you have questions for Bryan, now's the time. We'll stay on and answer any questions that you might have. I think I just had one earlier, and it was about flashover, and I answered that. But the first question was, what does flashover mean? And I think you used that when you showed that oak picture of the seedlings, Bryan.
Yep. So the below ground root systems of the trees, say you're treating a black gum and you have a red oak next to it, their root systems are intertwined underground. So what can happen is you can get flashover from that stem you treated over to the red oak or the maple or what have you. And that's something that you kind of see with a Mazapir. If you're just using Garlon 4 Ultra with a basal treatment, you shouldn't really have any issues with that.
So they're connected through root grafting, you think, Bryan, or is it picking up from the soil somewhere?
It could be root grafting of the same species, maybe. It could be through the soil. I'm not exactly sure what the process is there, but I just know it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, either way, be careful with a Mazapir, right?
Yeah, Dave knows, yeah.
Okay, next question. Or maybe I'd rephrase this to, what treatments might you recommend for bamboo?
So bamboo is a grass, right? So something as simple as a rodeo or an accord, depending on the site it's in. You can run that at 2 quarts to an acre, 3 ounces to a gallon of water in a backpack. The thing is with bamboo and any grass like that, I know it doesn't have the necessary characteristics of a grass the way it looks, but it's coverage. It's getting coverage on that leaf surface. So really a high volume application with bamboo and getting really good coverage on it is key. And then if you can run a higher rate of glyphosate or rodeo with Polaris, a Mazapir, you can get good control.
Okay, let's see. Next question about recommendations for orchard or garden sprays that are apiary friendly, so friendly to bees. Are we concerned about that with any of our herbicide recommendations, Bryan?
No, it's so if the products are going to harm bees, it'll have a bee box on the label. Which is just a picture of a bumblebee on there, and it'll highlight, what it could potentially do to a bee. A lot of the products that we use, pretty much all the products we use in vegetation management, are not going to harm bees. The only way you're going to harm a bee is if you sit there and really target a bee and hose it down. If you're spraying and you get some on a bee or a, birds or anything, there's not enough concentration of the herbicide to really do anything there. But if you are worried about bees, just try to spray outside of their most active times of the day, which is, I believe like mid-morning or late morning throughout the afternoon when they're out flying around and feeding. So.
Yeah, I think what I've seen with issues with bees and other pollinators is more that you're impacting the plants that they might be feeding on, not directly harming the insect itself. And that's a lot of it with the Roundup Ready type crops and things like that today, where the farms just don't have the weeds and those plants that the pollinators used to have. And so it isn't that the herbicide itself is actually killing the insect, though.
Right, and it's the same thing with aquatic applications. If you're using aquatic herbicides and surfactants, it isn't the herbicide affecting the aquatic species. It's the vegetation that you controlled that died in the water and messed with the dissolved oxygen levels, that decaying organic matter that affects the species.
And it looks like I just have one more question up here now, Bryan, and it was asking if you could share the PDF. And so I will make a suggestion, either email me or email Bryan directly. His email is up there. And if you're willing to share a PDF, would you be able to email it to folks, Bryan?
Yeah, that's not a problem. I can do that. Just reach out to me, and I'll save it into a PDF format and shoot it over to you.
Okay, yeah, and I have a comment from Paul Knoll asking if it will be available. I did get another question just now, though. Recommendations for basal spraying multi-stemmed woody shrubs. Do you need to spray each individual stem, or can you simply do a circumference spray? This was a question from some of my spray contractors.
So with the multi-stem shrubby species like a barberry, the way I've always done it was get my wand into the center of the plant of the target and just kind of more so, swirl it around to get coverage inside versus trying to look at each individual stem and treat up the stem and then get the underside. So I get inside of it and try to get coverage that way, and then go around the outside, take a look at it, and if there's any spots I missed or I think I need to touch up, I'll hit those again.
Yeah, I kind of describe it as painting those stems, but it isn't that you're treating individual ones. You're closing your nozzle down relatively tightly, getting your pressure up high, and really getting that spray just to kind of blast in there on multiflora rose or Japanese barberry, things like that, where you can just really blast those stems and get coverage. But you don't really need to concentrate in making sure every single stem is treated completely around it. I've seen with multiflora rose, even for example, they'll be wilted by the time you walk back through the area after an hour or two. So it can be a really effective way to control some of those stems. The only thing I've seen is shrub honeysuckles. So large shrub honeysuckles are pretty resistant to triclopyr, and I think just the thickness of the bark or whatever doesn't allow it to penetrate real well. So if you're treating a lot of large honeysuckle stem, 3 inches, 4 inches in diameter, you're probably not going to have real good luck. Small honeysuckle, no problem. I don't know if you've seen that, Bryan.
Yeah, for sure. With the honeysuckle, you're going to be better off trying to do a foliar treatment with glyphosate on the honeysuckle more so than using the triclopyr.
Yeah.
Now, like autumn olive, you triclopyr will wipe it out.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's a great treatment if you can get out dormant season or early spring, especially when the invasives are just popping leaves out. It's a really productive time of year to treat shrubs. They're much different in the sense from tree of heaven, where they're not able to send up root sprouts. So you literally year-round treatments, no problem on those guys. And that's all I have. All
right, Dave. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I apologized if I went a little long, but I'm a sales guy, so I happen to talk a lot, I guess.
It's in your nature.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, thanks, Bryan. Thanks for sharing the information, and thanks everyone for joining us. So this, we may try to do this again in the future, but this is the last one in our series. So I want to appreciate everybody that registered, and I hope you got some good information out of it. I do plan to send the recording along with the Survey Monkey for pesticide credits. But in addition to those things, I will also be sending an evaluation. So I'd like to get some feedback from you, what you thought and what you got out of this kind of training. So appreciate it, folks. And we'll catch up with you down the road. So thanks, Bryan.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Yep. I'm going to leave the meeting here.